Hi guys, and welcome to my channel Dan Blake Talks Fashion. We are here in East London to explore the fabulous world of vintage shopping.
So it's estimated that the UK sends around 11 million items of unwanted clothing to landfill each week. But by shopping vintage, it's also estimated that we can save around 16.3 million tonnes of CO2 each year. I'm here in East London to check it out.
So guys, back as a baby stylist, my background actually really started in vintage clothing. I used to live in Notting Hill, in London's Notting Hill, on the world famous Portobello Road, and vintage items were an absolute godsend to me being able to source clothing. So that's where I've had my first learning relationships. So back then, when you first start as a fashion stylist, it's not that big designers are lending you clothing straight away. So I sourced vintage, and do you know what I found? It gave my styling, my fashion styling, so much personality. There's a reason for that. Vintage items of clothing are made in different dimensions to what they're made in now. So they might be bigger, more expressive, they might have different shapes. Obviously you've got all of the subcultures, the trends from different times. And one top tip I was going to mention to you guys is, if you are an emerging fashion stylist looking to get into fashion styling, this is a really good top tip for you. When you source clothing from the shops, things can tend to look a little bit commercial, a little bit too clean. But vintage items of clothing actually give your fashion styling some much needed elevated personality. So what I would say is, just include a couple of vintage items of clothing in your styling and see the difference. It will transform your looks and your style and give them personality. Okay, so my first top tip is to mix things up. When you first start shopping in vintage, it might feel like you need to dress head to toe in 1960s or 1970s clothing, and you can feel almost a little bit intimidated by the vintage styles. Be aware that you can just pick out one or two pieces of personality that you can mix with your current wardrobe to elevate or change your style. So if you are new to shopping vintage and it feels like a bit too much, a bit too new, like you're a little bit out of your depth, my top tip to you guys is to start with accessory items. Okay, so think belts, think hats, think scarves. Dip your toe in the water with those. They can elevate your looks really easily, and that can be a really great starting point to start to explore the world of vintage without the overwhelm. Okay, so my second top tip is to ask yourself, do you love it? Okay, you need to love it. It's really easy to be overwhelmed by loads of different styles when you start vintage shopping. So just ask yourself the question, do I really love this, and can I use this in my wardrobe? My next top tip is all about sizing. If you're used to shopping on size and you know your dress size, like your size sort of 10, 12, 14 or whatever, and you go into the vintage store and you start to look at the labels, you'll notice that maybe a lot of the items actually don't fit you on your size, and that's really normal and to be expected, okay? In the 1960s and the 1970s, different decades, they actually had really different gradings on sizings. So expect for your sizing, your normal size, not to work in the vintage clothes in the store. And the top tip is to just really have a good old rummage and try on those items to see if they fit you. Like, let yourself have a really good try on. Think of this as like a bit of a dressing up box, yeah? You're here to just explore and just, leave your own style personality behind. Be prepared to have a really good try on. Hey guys, so the next thing I wanted to say is just think about any item that you might want to have altered. So you might fall in love with an item that's a little bit too big for you. Most things that are too big can be altered, but there are one or two things that you'll find it tricky to alter. For example, if it's got like lots of beading in it, for example, like a beaded dress, or sometimes velvet might be quite difficult to take in or out, because if you take it out, it tends to leave creases.
Also, consider the cost of an alteration. Sometimes alterations actually cost more than the garment you're looking at. So if the cost of the alteration costs more than the garment you're thinking of buying, you might want to reconsider it.
So what do you do if you're a personal stylist or if you're a fashion stylist and you're sourcing clothing for a client who's not with you in the shop? Now, the best thing to do is to make measurements of your client's body shape and then to bring a tape measure with you and size up the clothes in store that you're thinking of buying across the bust line or across the shoulder line, for men across the chest line, and just see if they are equivalent. Sizes will change. They also change from US and Europe, and they change on decade 2. So the best thing to do really is to bring the client into the shop with you and have a fitting. Okay, so my next top tip is this. You won't believe how many things that I found that kind of lack hanger appeal. So you see the item on the hanger in the shop, and it doesn't really do much for you, but when you try it on, that item is the kind of well piece that you come out of the wardrobe, that sort of really amazing item that you just fall in love with. So what I would say is really be prepared to roll up your sleeves, get stuck in and try these pieces on. So guys, you do not need to be a sustainability expert to know that actually the overproduction of clothes and the waste and landfill involved in overproduction of clothing is a real problem for the fashion industry and for the entire planet. Okay, so shopping vintage or making vintage shopping part of your manifesto as a fashion or personal stylist, for example, is a really great way to help with fashion sustainability. Hi guys, so I hope you've enjoyed this video on vintage sourcing as much as me. I've really enjoyed it. I've got my items here, went shopping, did a bit of vintage shopping, guys. I was just going to say, if you have any questions or perhaps you've got some top tips or hacks yourself. Are you a lover of vintage shopping? Do you like vintage as much as me? I'd like to hear from you. Please leave some comments down below because that'd be great for us to connect, and like and subscribe if you'd like to hear some more news from me.